Zac Efron on playing Ted Bundy. I wanted to make this film for the victims. The official trailer for Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, starring Zac Efron as serial killer Ted Bundy. Video Netflix. Zac Efron in American Teen Dream is now playing Ted Bundy, one of the most violent misogynists in recorded history. Photograph Samir. When first heard about a chance to play, he was wary. This was a few years. I didn't want to jump in too early to what could have potentially been the wrong version of this movie, he says. I was very hesitant. It is the morning after the London premiere, and Efron is with the film's director, in a hotel room. He's drinking from. Since starring in the extraordinarily successful Disney film High School Musical, in 2006, the 31-year-old has been swooned over you potentially a problem as he heads further into adulthood. He has contended with, in many of his films his looks are addressed head-on, as if they will only confuse the audience if no one mentions them. In Bad Neighbors, he is an American teen dream, in other words, and now he is playing Bundy, one of the most violent misogynists in recorded history, who raped, murdered and sometimes decapitated women. At his 19th, Bundy was considered good-looking in the pantheon of serial killers, which is, of course, quite different from being good-looking in the pantheon of movie stars. It has been suggested, and that is not counting what happens at the end of the interview, after I turn off my dictaphone. In seconds, because I feel like you do, Efron says. Within minutes, there are calls to say that the two men have pulled out of a scheduled photo shoot. Berlinger, a veteran documentary maker whose work has led to wrongful convictions being overturned, has spent a couple of years focused on Bundy, having also made a 4-part documentary that came out on Netflix in January, on the 30th anniversary of the murderer's execution. It is based on the picture that emerges in the documentary is of a gaping void of a man, an extreme narcissist. Bundy talks on as Bundy's Florida trial unfolded, he became a gruesome celebrity. In Extremely Wicked, speaking to New York Magazine, Bundy's former defense lawyer John Henry Brown described the United States as being in the middle of a Bundy binge, with his case discussed on countless podcasts over the past few years, and the subject of a 2-hour special on the Oxygen network called Snap. Notorious Ted Bundy. This year, also, memorabilia abounded during Bundy's lifetime, and on ETSE Today you can take your pick of a huge variety of t-shirts. One features his face and the beige VW Beetle he drove, with the slogan Ted Bundy Original Uber. Another shows, much of Extremely Wicked takes place in the courtroom, Efron in a bow tie, playing to the crowd. Bundy, the obsessive focus on Bundy has sharpened questions about who should be the focus of true crime, the perpetrator or the victims. While Extremely Wicked, Clover, who is played by Lily Collins, is shown only in relation to Bundy. She meets him, falls quickly in love, worries about whether he is guilty of the horrific crimes he is increasingly accused of, and turns for a while to drink. We are supposed to. Bundy, meanwhile, is the active and central character, studying for law school, traveling, planning and executing escapes from prison, defending himself in court, and manipulating first Clover and then a woman called, with whom he fathers a child while he is on death row. Efron spent time in the makeup chair next to the actor Terry Kinney, who plays a detective in the film, and who told him what it was like in the 1970s, he says, to be a young person witnessing Ted Bundy's escapades, and what turned out to be terrible behavior. This is not a glam. I ask if that was important to him, and he says it is. It's absolutely true. The idea behind the film is to show how Bundy took the world in. How he became. Ted Bundy himself said that murderers don't come crawling out of the dark, Efron says. Yeah, murderers don't come out of the dark with long teeth and blood dripping off their chins, you know? Says Berlinger. They're your brother, you know. We want to think a serial killer is some dark, twisted social outcast and of course Bundy was dark and twisted but some dark, twisted social outcast who couldn't fit into society, because that falsely implies that they're easily identifiable, and therefore you can avoid them. But what Bundy not to mention that he was a star, he was on TV and in the news, Efron says. I asked Berlinger about his motivation in making first the documentary and then the scripted drama, and he says that when he first heard the Bundy tapes he called his daughters, who are at college. He asked whether I felt for a new generation the lessons of Bundy, the social justice part can't be overstated. That just because Efron echoes this motivation. He says he became, after Conversations with a Killer came out, there was a lot of discussion on Twitter about Bundy's looks, leading to a statement from the official Netflix account. I've seen a lot of talk about Ted Bundy's alleged hotness and would like to gently remind everyone that there are literally thousands of hot men on the service, almost all of whom are not convicted serial murderers. I suggest to Efron that his film is unlikely to quell that discussion, and he says he hopes the film will be a warning message. I would love. The implication behind all this is that women could have avoided Bundy's violence by being more careful. That they should have looked. I put it to Efron later on that it's difficult as a woman to live in the world if you can't trust anyone, particularly if, as the film shows, in that person's personal relationships they behave lovingly. It's difficult we're not saying don't trust anyone, Berlinger says, but we're saying eyes wide open. He says we're hyper-aware, Efron says, that, no, we're not. Because by the end of the movie Bundy is alone, Berlinger says. He's had to admit, not glamorous or standing for a cause, Efron says. He's dead. And really the point of the movie is to portray deception and betrayal, Berlinger says. And karma, Efron says. As I go to leave, Efron says I wanted to make this film for the victims. There is a list of all extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile opens in cinemas, and is also available on Sky Cinema, on Friday, May 3rd. Review it.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park, pot.